Hello, I'm Michael Pierce, and this is The Human Condition. Our topic today is anti-nutrients in plants and how they work. These are plant vampires. There have been a lot of questions about what in the world is going on with patients that try different kinds of keto and carnivore diets, and how they get better from chronic diseases of all different kinds. A lot of people get trapped into one particular explanation, and it's a good one, and it makes sense, and that is the insulin resistance explanation. Dr. Ben Bickman does a fantastic job explaining this, and so do many, many other people. I think that it's really important to understand that mechanism and master it. The idea that insulin resistance caused by excess carbohydrates screws up a whole bunch of inflammatory cascades, and it messes up the endocrine system, and it messes up your energy system and your mitochondria, and it's really quite a big deal. So I think that that's a good mechanism. However, sometimes we have patients where we can't find any evidence that there's any insulin resistance. We can't find any blood markers that are messed up. We don't really see a reduction when we reduce carbohydrates and increase plant foods. We don't see that the patient gets much better, and we don't understand why that case is. And I think I have an explanation for us. It's not mine, of course. But the idea is that sometimes the reason for a person doing an elimination diet that gets rid of plant-based foods is not necessary, and sometimes dairy too, is not necessarily an insulin resistance or mitochondrial based problem. I think that there is a real case to be made for the anti-nutrient idea. Now, evolutionarily, plants don't have a defense system like animals do the same way. Animals have teeth and horns and claws and hooves, and and tusks. They can do all kinds of things to defend themselves from being eaten. So plants need to have some kind of mechanism to tell the animals to go away. Now, most plants don't really try to kill the animals that are around them, but they do have lethal, in some cases, chemicals that they release. These chemicals are generally chemicals that don't kill the animals. They just make them feel bad and feel upset stomach, and they go away. And then they eat other plants, and then they can come back again and eat those very same plants again after they've flowered and bloomed and refilled their foliage. It turns out that Stephen Herod Buhner wrote in some of his books on plants that plants can lose about 18% of their mass before they really are in trouble. And so that's a very big generalization because many plants are quite different. But animals that tend to eat plants can strip them. And at some point, the plants make more and more and more of these anti-nutrients and release them, and the animals feel sick. They cause problems with their bile production, problems with their gut motility. They cause inflammation, they cause acid formation and break the bonds of the tight junctions in the intestine. These things have been well established for years in lectin chemistry. Now, lectins are just one anti-nutrient. So the most common criticism I get about this particular argument when I don't unpack it fully for people is, oh, well, I already avoided gluten, and so I should be fine. Well, gluten is just the most famous one of one class of anti-nutrients. It's one kind of lectin, which is one kind of anti-nutrient. So that's why just getting rid of lectin is not going to cut it for most people. So that's something that you see a lot of people go through, and I went through. So I think you need to realize that as we eat plants that are farmed in an agricultural setting, that have been manipulated with GMOs, that have been hybridized with natural methods and other synthetic methods, they're trying to make more protein. And a lectin or an anti-nutrient is some combination of protein and carbohydrate that can act as an antigen. It can act as a mitogen. It can act as a thing that bothers your immune system. So these anti-nutrients can be of many, many different classes. So I just want to give you an introduction to some of their names. There are cruciferous vegetables, and cruciferous vegetables have different kinds of problems with them, like phytates and raffinose. There are isothiocyanates and glycoalkaloids. There are goitrogens and tannins and phytates and saponins and chaconins. These are molecules that are in everything from potatoes and nightshades and tomatoes and mushrooms and green peppers and red peppers and yellow peppers. They're in eggplant. Some of them are in grains, beans, nuts, and seeds, like the lectin family. And so what'll happen a lot with my patients is that they'll say to me something really smart when they really want to eat a certain food that I tell them they need to stay away from. And they'll be like, well, I need my bread, or I need my potatoes, or I need my tomatoes, or I got to have my whatever it is. There's something they're addicted to and they won't give it up. And they don't realize that it's probably some level of addiction. And I'm not trying to say that they're a heroin addict, but maybe that's not too far from the truth. Have you ever heard about heroin in food? Have you ever heard about opiates in food and opiates in your gut? Well, it turns out that our guts can form opiates from natural molecules with our gut flora. So you can have gluteomorphine, caseomorphine, soy morphine, and there's many other forms of morphine that can be produced by gut bacteria from the raw materials in plant foods. So it's difficult for a child that is just screaming, having a tantrum on the floor, and they want their mac and cheese, they want their bagels and cream cheese, which is usually the foods that set off the kids that are autistic or that are having ADHD or that are the worst eaters. The kids that are the most sensitive to texture and the most sensitive to foods, and their diets over time become so restricted that they really only want bread and dairy. They want cheese and bread, and they want cheesy stuff, and they want mac and cheese, and they want bagels and cream cheese, and they will hold out and resist other foods. They won't eat much meat. And you might wonder, well, gosh, it almost seems like their bile is suppressed. It almost seems like they don't produce enough bile to digest the fats that you want to feed them. And in fact, that's true. That many of these foods, like tryptase inhibitors, they inhibit the production of bile and the effectiveness of bile in your body. So once you've produced it, or if you have not produced it, all the different mechanisms are different. Some plants will inhibit the production, and some will inhibit the use and utilization. And some will bind to the nutrients, some will steal B vitamins, some will steal other vitamins, some will bind to fats or proteins and steal amino acids, some will bind to minerals and steal minerals. Some will be good boys and girls and they will bind to heavy metals and steal them, and that's good, we want that, but there's other ways to get rid of them. So there's a whole load of problems where these anti-nutrients can be binding to your nutrients and carrying them out, and or being antigens. So there's two general mechanisms. It either binds to good stuff and you poop it out, or it can do both. It acts as an antigen, a molecular mimicry. It pretends it's somebody else, and it acts like a bacteria or a virus or a worm or a protozoan or some kind of invading organism, and it mimics that infection. It can sometimes trigger autoimmune diseases where a food anti-nutrient acts as an antigen that's so powerful that the immune system just can't handle it anymore. There is a hypothesis that the second regression syndrome in autism can sometimes be related to food antigens. So if you have a patient, a young child that's experienced an autism regression, and they recover somewhat, and then they receive a second regression event or exhibit a second regression event where they lose more speech and they regress more, one of the hypotheses, aside from renewed injury, is that they may have eaten a whole bunch more anti-nutrients, and that could be a trigger. In fact, quite a bit of the research shows that ketogenic diets are the best way, the most powerful way of all to help with a number of these kids. Now, try feeding an autistic child a ketogenic diet overnight. So I'm a big believer in transitions. I don't think you can do it quickly, and I think you have to use all of your powers to help these kids get better. So that means modifying their diet, it means learning cooking techniques, that means substituting and switching out foods, trying to add little things in there and slowly transition over time so that they will eat the food and not just throw it on the wall. I think it's important to detox these kids as well, because many of them have a lot of mold toxins, chemical toxins, glyphosate toxins, aluminum adjuvant toxins from jabs. They've got processed artificial colors, flavors, and preservatives. They've got too many carbs. They got a lot of that to clean out. And then when you try to finally give them these foods that are less antigenic and have less plant antigens, which are generally vegetables. It's not so much fruit, it's generally vegetables, it's generally plants, grains, beans, nuts, seeds, leaves, things that we think are good. And look, I'm a foodie. I love food. I'm a trained chef. I am a doctor. I love food. And the last thing I want to do is poo-poo all these wonderful plant foods. But sometimes for really sick people, you got to go through this bottleneck of getting rid of these foods completely and cleansing out the body for weeks at a time, maybe longer, so the immune system can calm down. Now, generally, if you're cleaning out these foods in a person and you can do it in a couple of days, they feel a little bit better. That's me. Sometimes I quit foods and I feel better in a couple of days. Some people that are sicker may have a buildup in their intestines and they've really got to cleanse, and they might need to get rid of a lot of sludge in their colon and their small intestine for, 3, 4, 12 weeks, and that happens. Some people have such a problem with their immune system that their IgG antibodies are elevated. And you might see that. And when IgG antibodies have been elevated, they usually don't come down for 6 months. So you might find that an autistic child has to stay on a strict diet for 6 months. And that's why. It's not God hates you. It's just because you've got to understand physiology. And sometimes it takes that doing. It's also important to notice that, I'm not trying to say that there's some holy thing about meat or eggs. It's just that meat and eggs seem to be very good when you're trying to avoid dairy and plants. And then again, Paul Saladino and others allow fruit because fruit has very little antinutrients. And so that's why some of these keto, carnivore, and low-carb diets do so well with people that have all kinds of diverse conditions, because any condition you can think of where the stealing of nutrients has been a problem, and or the formation of autoimmune reactions or pseudo-infections or fevers or illnesses that look like fatigue and weakening of the immune system or overreaction of the immune system, those all can be a problem. So I think it's important to realize that could be all of the autoimmune classes of diseases. It could be all of the chronic fatigue syndrome diseases. It could be most of the chronic infectious diseases that look like chronic Lyme and other types of things. And I'm not trying to denigrate anybody that's got a Lyme diagnosis. If you've got an infection, then go ahead and treat it. But if you're thinking that you can't find the infection and you're really struggling to find it, then maybe think that it could be your body reacting to molecular mimicry, to the food antigens that we're pouring down our mouth all the time. And the thing that people don't realize is that you keep renewing it every day when you eat. So if you don't give your body a chance to calm that down and your immune system and your white blood cells to recover, you're never going to get better. So you need to give your body a break that could be longer than 3 weeks. And I find that works extremely well. So I'd like you to consider that it's more than gluten, it's more than lectins. And when you hear somebody say, oh, you've got to get a low lectin diet, and then you smartly go and look up lectins and say, well, I can eat broccoli, and I can eat rice, and I can eat all these other foods that don't have gluten or lectins in them, consider that there's a whole bunch more anti-nutrients. Now, please see my ebook, which is on my website for free, thehumanconditionlab.com, the Elimination Diets 101. You just give your email, it's free. And we won't pester you if you don't want to be pestered, but we'd love to know who you are and get you on our list in case for some reason I get removed from YouTube.